Hi, JDL Brushes here, and we have a new video. This time I am working on a landscape design sketch, and it's actually kind of different compared to the last landscape design sketch, because the approach that I'm going for here is a little more different. And whenever I do these sketches or renderings rather, I always try to test things out. I don't exactly have one kind of process, and I'm always trying new things, new methods, and I'm really just kind of experimenting. And yeah, in the last kind of landscape design focused sketch, the end rendering was actually kind of boring, at least when it comes to the shadows, because I mean, for the hue parts where it feels kind of vibrant and saturated and lively, I think I actually did a very good job. Well, not a very good job, but it's satisfactory, I guess. But this time I wanted to focus more on rendering in really solid shadows, and so that's what I'm starting with at the moment. I'm working on the shadows, and yeah, like I said before, I try to space out the rendering strokes when it comes to pretty much every kind of face whenever I have to render something, say for the shadows, for the color, and well, yeah, for those two things. So it's not really anyway. Fuck, what am I trying to say? I think it's important to space out your strokes. That's basically it. And first of all, it makes your sketch look more like a marker sketch, and it also helps the final result, in that when you start kind of combining the colors, the shadows, the line sketch, and etc., it doesn't look very kind of muddled, and it can actually kind of look very watercolor like, and that's not the look that I'm trying to go for. So yeah. And once I'm done with the shadows, and by the way, when I'm doing the shadows, I am not so focused on getting the right kind of color for the shadow, because I can always change that whenever. And in this case, I actually darkened it using the levels later on in the video, and darkening or increasing the levels actually does make the shadows darker, and it helps make the entire image more contrasted and less muted in a way. So after I settled the shadow face, I started going for the colors. Sorry. So I started going for the colors, and I went for the vegetation, and I'm not exactly proud of how I rendered the vegetation, because it's actually kind of I feel like I didn't use a lot of varied strokes, and it actually kind of feels very plain. So yeah, I think I should have done more when it comes to the vegetation. But for the ground, as you can see, I actually did a very solid job of varying the strokes, and it actually does look like a marker sketch. And yeah, and it also makes the rendering more interesting, instead of it being very kind of colored flatly, where every single shape is kind of filled up. I don't know, it kind of looks boring if you do it that way. So yeah, so right now I'm going back to the vegetation, to the trees, and I think I'm trying to make it more, well, I'm working on the darker parts of the vegetation, but I definitely did that more so to vary the values of the tree and make it more interesting. So yeah, and I think I'm doing a good job as well with the kind of seats and the kind of the things where you put the trees and the other plants. Yeah, so anyway, so now I'm working on the walls, I guess, and again, for the colors as well as the shadows, as long as everything is layered, you don't really have to worry about getting the exact color. As you can see, I'm using the hue and saturation, and even some color balance to kind of get the right color that I want. And I'm actually not that good with picking out colors, generally speaking. For example, in this landscape design sketch, I just picked the browns and the greens and some reds and those kind of wall things, kind of separating certain sections of the environment. They are gray, but they do have that kind of bluish tint, so that's pretty much the only colors I used. And going back to the trees and the other vegetation, I added some red hued strokes, and yeah, it actually does make it look a little more interesting. So yeah. Oh, so I think you noticed that the shadows are now way darker, and that is the look that I'm trying to go for. Or I think it's the look that I think works for marker sketches. Now there are many styles to kind of try when you're trying to render with markers, but I think rendering with some kind of darker, like almost black kind of shadowed parts makes the rendering it has a look to it. It's a nice style. It's almost comic like in a way. And yeah. So now I think I'm pretty much close to finishing. I'm working on some adjustment layers, just trying to brighten up the colors, using the vibrance adjustment layer. And for the almost final face, I go in for the kind of white liner face, and that's basically where I use the line tool, and I overlay certain lines with that white line tool, and it just adds a little more it adds a finished touch to the sketch. So yeah, and I think I'm doing fine. And I kind of switch between the line tool and the brush tool because the line tool only goes for, I don't know, it can only work for straight lines. It can't curve in any way. So I switch between the line tool and the basic brush tool or brush that's kind of set to a 2-point size or something. So that's it. Whichever your art, whatever your tool, make it beautiful. Bye.